blood is on her hands." The scream cut through the ballroom, echoing in the sudden, terrible silence. My stepmom, Brenda, a woman who lived for public drama, had her finger pointed right at me. "Ask her. Ask this traitor what she did." I just stood there, frozen. My dress uniform, the one I had pressed just hours before, suddenly felt like a cheap costume. The air crackled. Event security started moving toward her, but then the grand doors at the back of the hall burst open. Two men in immaculate dress uniforms, flanked by MPs, strode in. The man in front was Colonel Marcus Thorne, my actual commander from the 75th Cyber Intel Group. He didn't scan the room, his eyes locked directly on me. He ignored Brenda completely and barked at the confused event staff. "Captain Rostova, we have a red file situation. Stand down." Brenda just sputtered. I'm exposing her. She's a disgrace to the uniform." Thorne didn't even flinch. He never broke eye contact with me. "Captain, confirm your call sign." The entire room leaned in. My voice was cold, clear, and cut through the tension. "Call sign Oracle, sir." I watched Brenda's face collapse, the vicious triumph dissolving into pure blank confusion. The entire power dynamic of the room shifted in a single second. Brenda had been planning this ambush for weeks. She thought traitor was the word that would end my career. She had no idea Oracle was the word that commanded the room. To understand how she miscalculated so badly, you have to understand the rumor she tried to weaponize, and the operation she knew nothing about. It all started 2 weeks earlier. I was home on leave, trying to do the impossible, coordinate our family's attendance for the upcoming gala. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my father, David, a retired NCO who respected tradition above all else, and Brenda. She was, as always, fawning over her own son, my stepbrother Chad, a public affairs specialist she adored. "Chad just gets to be in the real action," she gushed. "It's so exciting. We're just so glad you have that boring admin thing you do up at Fort Meade, Eva. It's safe." The casual dismissal, the polite pat on the head. I was used to it. That familiar tired weight settled in my stomach. This was just how it always was. The slight that changed everything came later that day. I was on a mandatory check-in call with my unit, encrypted of course, but I had stepped into the hallway for better reception. I didn't know Brenda was listening. All I said was debriefing Cinder Shade. That was it. Hours later, after my father had gone to bed, she cornered me by the stairs. Her eyes were narrow. "I heard from Chad," she whispered, "that Cinder Shade was a disaster. That some intel officer got a soldier killed." Her voice dropped, full of venom. "Was that you, Eva? Is that what you do in your boring job? Cover up deaths?" A familiar coldness washed over me. But this was different. This wasn't just an insult. It was a security breach. My training took over, walls snapping up instantly. I kept my face blank, my voice flat. "You don't know what you're talking about, Brenda." That was all she needed. My security-driven silence was, to her, a confession. Her face twisted into a mask of self-righteousness. "I knew it," she hissed. "You're a coward. You're actually going to that gala to get some pathetic little award, while my son, a real soldier, has to clean up your mess." She truly believed she had me. She had no idea what she had just set in motion. To them, I was just Eva, the quiet one. The admin. I remember standing on the back porch a few months ago, the smell of charcoal and lighter fluid thick in the air. My father, David, a man who wore his NCO service like a second skin, was practically glowing. He was holding up a framed certificate. "This is what it's about, Eva," he said, his voice booming with pride. Getting seen, being boots on the ground. He was pointing at the Soldier of the Month award my stepbrother Chad had gotten. Chad, the family's golden boy, who worked in public affairs and knew how to smile for a camera, was soaking it all in. I just nodded. sipping my warm soda. I had just driven in from Mead, my eyes gritty from staring at a screen for 72 hours straight. We'd just finished a war game simulation so intense that I hadn't slept, and my analysis had identified a critical flaw in a national defense grid. I had just presented my findings to a 2-star general, but out here, on the porch, none of that mattered. Here, the pinnacle of achievement was a paper certificate from base command. It was like I was living in a different language, a different world. My successes were silent, digital, and classified. Theirs were loud and framed on the wall. My stepmom, Brenda, of course, chimed in, putting her arm around Chad. Exactly. Chad is always in his uniform, out there, making a real difference. We're so proud. She gave me that tight, polite smile. Well, we're just glad you have such a stable government job, honey. It's good to be safe. Safe? That was the word they always used for me. Overeducated, underachieving, and safe. I was the computer nerd who wasn't a real soldier, not like Chad. I let the insults slide off me. It was easier than trying to explain a reality they couldn't, and wouldn't, ever want to understand. I just kept quiet. It was the role I was assigned. My real world wasn't safe. It wasn't a backyard barbecue. My real world was a dark, sterile room, locked behind a vault door, where the only light came from 24 monitors, and the only sound was the hum of servers. It was a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility. And in that room, I wasn't Eva. I was Oracle. I wasn't an admin. I was the mission commander for a signals intelligence team. And Operation Cindershade, the name Brenda had spit at me like an accusation. That was my op. It was the op that changed everything. Brenda was right about one thing. Blood was involved. We were guiding a human asset, a soldier, Alpha, through hostile territory, using a compromised network. My team was his only lifeline, feeding him data, watching for threats. We were deep into the operation, a clean exfiltration in sight, when a new signal appeared on my screen. It wasn't just new, it was impossible. It shouldn't have existed. It was a ghost, a phantom in the data stream, and it was hunting us. I had seconds, literally seconds, to make a choice. If I pulled the asset out, the ghost signal would vanish, and we'd learn nothing. The entire network, a dozen other operators still embedded, they would all remain vulnerable to a threat we couldn't see. But if I let Alpha continue, I could use him as bait to identify the new threat, and I would be signing his death warrant. The air in the SCIF was so cold it hurt to breathe. My CO, Colonel Marcus Thorne, a man who only cared about the mission, was on the hot mic. His voice was sandpaper. Oracle? What's your call? There was no time for emotion, only the call. It's a ghost signal, sir, I said, my voice sounding distant even to me. They're baiting us. If we pull Alpha, we lose the ghost. We have to burn the network. I took a breath. We lose Alpha, but we save the operation. There was a half-second of static that felt like an eternity. Then Thorne's voice came back, just as cold. Solid call, Oracle, execute. And just like that, I gave the order. I watched a man die on my screen, and in doing so, I identified the breach and saved the lives of 12 other operators. That was the blood Brenda accused me of. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a cover-up. It was a terrible, necessary command decision, the kind her real soldier son would never even be cleared to read the report on. After Brenda's accusation, the usual flash of frustration, that old, tired ache of being misunderstood, was instantly replaced by something else. A cold, sharp clarity. She hadn't just insulted me. She hadn't just tried to hurt me. She had used a classified operational code word. This was no longer a dysfunctional family drama, something to be endured until I left. This was a potential compromise of operational secrecy. In that moment, she stopped being my stepmom, and she became a threat. And I realized I wasn't going to fight her with emotion, the language she'd always beaten me with. I was going to use my language. I was going to use protocol. The next morning, I didn't call my father to complain. I didn't argue. I got in my car and drove straight to Fort Meade. I bypassed my usual office and walked directly into the command suite, requesting a secure meeting with my CO, Colonel Thorne. As soon as the vault door hissed shut, I laid it out. "Sir, I need to report a PACUS. A non-cleared civilian, my stepmother, is in possession of the code word cinder, shade, and is actively disseminating a false narrative of a cover-up." Thorne's entire demeanor shifted. This was the man I'd made the hard call for. The one who'd heard my voice as a soldier died. His eyes went flat, all traces of the boss gone, replaced by the commander. A compromised operation, a leak. This was his worst nightmare. "She's attending the gala with you?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "As a guest of this command?" I just nodded once. "Yes, sir." He stood and stared at the tactical map on his wall for a long, silent moment, calculating. "Captain," he said finally, turning back, "your security clearance is now officially under review, pending this inquiry." My stomach dropped, but he wasn't finished. "However, you will attend that gala. You will accept your award as planned." He leaned forward, his voice a quiet command. "My team and I will be providing close support." I understood. This was no longer a simple ceremony. It was a counterintelligence operation. The award I was scheduled to receive was just a simple Army Commendation Medal. A plausible, boring cover story. It was the perfect bait. Brenda saw it as my last, pathetic attempt at relevance, which only made her more eager to plan her public takedown. While I calmly picked out my dress uniform, Colonel Thorne was activating his elite ops team. The guest list was being modified. The trap was being set. Brenda was ironing her dress, practicing her speech of moral outrage. She had no idea I had just designated her a hostile actor, and that the gala was no longer a party, it was a trap. The gala was exactly as grand as advertised. The hotel ballroom was massive, a sea of dress uniforms, glittering gowns, and the expensive suits of defense contractors. Hundreds of people, a low hum of powerful conversations. My father, David, a retired NCO who valued public perception, and my stepmom, Brenda, a woman who thrived on being the center of attention, were at a very important personnel near the front. I could see her from my assigned seat. She was holding court, leaning in, whispering to the other spouses at her table, her face a mask of faux concern. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew that tight, conspiratorial smile. She was laying the groundwork, painting me as the shameful one, the admin who was getting some pity award. It was the same story she'd told for years, the one my father always let her tell. The MC's voice pulled me from my thoughts. And now, for her dedicated service, Captain Eva Rostova. I stood up, my back straight, my uniform feeling stiff and heavy. I smoothed the front of my jacket, my heart a cold, steady drum. I made it 5 steps toward the stage before Brenda's voice, amplified by sheer malice, cut through the room. "A commendation?" she shouted, standing up, her wineglass held high like a weapon. "For what? For hiding?" The room went dead silent. Utterly, painfully silent. 1,000 eyes snapped to her, then to me. This was it. This was the moment she'd been planning, the public execution of the invisible child. "This woman is a traitor," she screamed, her voice shaking with righteous fury. "She has blood on her hands. A real soldier is dead because of her. She is a disgrace to my son's uniform, to her father's service." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the faint click of cell phones being raised to record. I just stood there. I didn't move. I saw my father, frozen at his table, his face completely ashen, staring at me in pure horror, his world collapsing. And just as Brenda drew breath for another volley, her face flushed with triumph, the main ballroom doors burst open. They slammed against the walls with a crash that echoed like a gunshot. Everyone flinched. Colonel Thorne strode in, flanked by 2 other operators from my team, both in full-dress uniform, and 2 military police. The music stopped. Thorne moved with a purpose that radiated pure, cold authority. He didn't stop at the table. He strode directly to the stage, took the microphone from the stunned MC and turned. His eyes found Brenda. "Stand down." His voice wasn't a request. It was a command. "Ma'am, you are in violation of U.S. Code Title 18. You are ordered to be silent." Brenda was stunned, her mouth opening and closing. I'm just telling the truth," she stammered, her confidence cracking. Thorne's voice was ice. "You are repeating a dangerously false narrative regarding Operation Cinder Shade. The soldier we lost was an American hero. His death was a tragedy, not a betrayal. It was a command decision." The room leaned in. Thorne then turned to me. "Captain Rostova, your Army Commendation Medal is a cover." He let that hang in the air. "You are not here for that." He motioned to his aide, who handed him a crimson-bound folder. Thorne opened it. "For actions taken during Operation Cinder Shade, Captain Eva Oracle Rostova, as mission commander, correctly identified a high-level signals breach." His voice filled the hall. "She made the command decision to sacrifice a compromised asset to preserve the lives of the 12-man team and secure the operational integrity of the entire European theater." A man I knew as Raptor, one of the operators who had entered with Thorne, stepped forward. His eyes found Brenda, and they were burning. "Ma'am, I was one of those 12 men. I'm alive today." His voice was raw. "Oracle made the call that let me come home. The blood on her hands you're screaming about, that's the sacrifice she had to live with so we wouldn't have to." The room finally understood. I wasn't an admin. I was Oracle, a mission commander. I turned my head and looked at my father. He was staring at me, his face a mask of disbelief, awe, and profound shame. He, the veteran who dismissed my career, slowly rose to his feet. He didn't speak. As a retired NCO, he snapped to attention. Brenda was ashen. The MPs moved quietly to her side. "Ma'am," one said softly, "you need to come with us." My stepmom had spent years trying to make me feel small. In the end, it only took one citation to show her, my father, and the entire world. I was the biggest person in the room. As the MPs quietly took Brenda by each arm, her face was a mask of chalky, slack-jawed disbelief. All the righteous fire was gone, leaving just a hollow, confused woman. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just went, escorted from the ballroom like a non-entity, a problem to be handled. The silence she left behind was so heavy it felt like a physical weight on my chest. It stretched for 1 second. 3. And then, from the back of the room, a single person started to clap. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom, hundreds of officers, contractors, and their spouses, was on its feet. The sound wasn't just applause. It was a wave of pure, thundering respect. It washed over me, and for the first time I didn't feel like Eva, the awkward girl at the family barbecue. I felt like Oracle. I felt seen. Colonel Thorne stepped forward, the crimson-bound folder still in his hand. He took the Distinguished Service Medal from it, a medal I never in a million years expected to see. His movements were precise. He unpinned the simple commendation ribbon I'd been told I was getting, and carefully pinned the heavy, important weight of the real medal in its place. He stepped back, his face unsmiling but his eyes filled with a fierce approval. He didn't offer a handshake. He snapped a salute. I raised my own hand, my movements crisp, and returned it. "Thank you, sir." He just nodded. "You earned it, Captain. You and your team." As he turned to leave the stage, a figure moved to replace him. My father. He walked like a man in a daze. His old NCO uniform, which he wasn't even wearing, was somehow present in the way he held himself. He stopped a few feet from me, his face working. He, the boots-on-the-ground veteran who had dismissed my boring desk job, was staring at the medal on my chest. His eyes were streaming, tears cutting clean tracks down his face. He tried to speak, but nothing came out. He just looked at me, really looked at me, as if for the very first time. He didn't hug me. He didn't say congratulations. He brought his heels together, his back ramrod straight, and raised his hand in a sharp, trembling salute. His voice was a thick, broken rasp. "Captain," my own throat was tight. All those years of craving his approval, of wanting him to see me, and here it was, in the only language he truly understood. I swallowed, my own eyes blurring, and I nodded. Sergeant Major, 1 year later, the world was different. I wasn't in a dark skiff anymore, and I wasn't in uniform. I was in a state-of-the-art briefing room, all glass and steel, at the head of a 20-foot polished mahogany table. A simple, elegant nameplate sat in front of me. Eva Rostova, Section Chief, J.S.O.C. I'd been promoted out of the daily operations and into senior leadership. I was briefing a room full of colonels and generals, men who outranked me on paper, but who were here in my house to listen to my analysis. My real team, the operators and analysts who had been in the trenches with me, were there, running the data. This was my new family. One built not on dysfunctional obligation, but on mutual respect and lethal competence. This was my world. After the briefing, as the generals were shaking my hand, my phone buzzed quietly on the table. A text. I glanced at it. It was from my father. My heart did a strange little kick. I opened it. "Eva, I'm in town. I know you're busy." I braced myself, but the next line was one I'd waited my entire life to read. I wanted to ask if I could take my daughter to lunch. Not the section chief, just my daughter. I stood there, reading it again. Just my daughter. A second message popped up, from a new, unknown number. My stomach tightened. "This is Brenda." My finger hovered over the delete button. They made me take a plea. I am so sorry. I didn't understand." I looked at Brenda's text for a long, quiet moment. I searched for the anger, the old resentment, the satisfaction. I felt nothing. It was just static, a notification from a past I had already closed the file on. I didn't reply. I just archived the message. It was irrelevant. But my father's text, that was different. That was an opening. It wasn't forgiveness, not really. It wasn't a promise that the past was fixed. It was a start, a new set of terms. My terms. I smiled, just a small, real smile, and typed back. "I've got a window at 1300. See you then." I put the phone away and turned to look out the blast-proof window of my office, out over the secure compound that was my domain. I was, finally, at peace. My stepmom tried to smear my name with blood, hoping to make me a traitor. She just never understood that in my world, my name was already a legend, and the blood meant I was a leader. If you've ever had your quiet competence mistaken for weakness, share your story below. In this community, we know the difference between loud accusations and real authority.